Rick and Morty is a pretty intertextual show. There literally hasn't been an episode that hasn't borrowed its plot from a popular movie and either ran with it or put its own spin on it. The creators of Rick and Morty simply love pop culture, and considering the show's whole concept stems from a vulgar parody of Back to the Future, it makes sense. The show that has made jokes about refusing to answer a literal call to adventure is pretty meta, and today we'll be looking at some of the scenes that Rick and Morty swiped. Hold on! Before we get started, how about you subscribe to our channel? You'll be joining the notification squad and get frequent updates on new content. And one more thing, why not take part in our emoji quiz? Can you guess what film this emoji is showing off? Wait to the end to find out. Inception. The second episode of Rick and Morty, titled Lawnmower Dog, has a ton of references. Outside of the mere title being a reference to Lawnmower Man, the entire episode heavily riffs on Inception. Rick invents a device that makes it possible to enter other people's dreams, a clear riff on Inception, which it also mocks a few times and criticizes for not making sense. Not only that, but it retains the idea of having a dream within a dream, when it dives into the dream of Scary Terry, a monster within the dream world who is heavily based on Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street. They go into his dream and help him overcome his classroom fears, which means he helps them get deeper into the dream world until they can finally plant the idea to give Morty an A in the brain of his teacher.
I know one thing for sure. I'm giving Morty an A in math, and that's my idea. That is an original thought.
Dreams are such a cool concept that there's a lot of opportunity for a show to create a layered parody. Rick and Morty takes two of the most famous movies set around dreams and manages to roll them into one. The most impressive part is all of these references only happen in one of the two stories going on in the episode. The second has plenty of references that we're going to talk about next. Animal Farm. The B story of Lawnmower Dog features, you guessed it, a dog. As well as being named after the Stephen King story Lawnmower Man, it has a lot of references to George Orwell's classic novel, Animal Farm. When Rick gives Snuffles the dog a headset to boost his intelligence, it isn't long before Snuffles works out how to alter it to allow him to communicate with humans. Much like the pigs of Animal Farm, he grows angry with the way humans have treated animals and overthrows them. He takes over the house and renames himself Snowball. While the name might just seem like a cute name for a white dog, it's actually a reference to one of the revolutionary pigs in Animal Farm played in the live-action movie by the always awesome Kelsey Grammer. Not only is the concept of animal revolution very similar, but Snowball himself isn't dissimilar from the pig in the book. They're both at their heart good revolutionaries who want the best for their kind. Eventually, Snowball and his dog kind travel off to another universe where they can live their days freely and start a new society of their own, something that the poor animals at Animal Farm could only dream of. The Matrix. One of the cool things about The Matrix was that in the original movie, it wasn't clear whether the entire movie took place in the Matrix. While the sequels made it clear that there was a world outside of the Matrix, it wasn't as clear in the first movie. There was every bit of a chance that Neo could have actually been in the Matrix the whole time, which would explain why he was able to do seemingly impossible things both in and out of the computer system. Rick and Morty plays about with this idea in the episode M. Night's Sham Aliens. In this episode, Rick is essentially put into a Matrix as the aliens try to get his recipe for concentrated dark matter. The Matrix they set up is so sophisticated that it even shuts down to give Rick and Jerry the thought that they are back in the real world when in fact they are still trapped in the Matrix. Unfortunately, Rick is a little too smart for the aliens, so their plan doesn't exactly work out in the same way that he'd want them to. He escapes and gives them what they think is the recipe for concentrated dark matter, but unfortunately for them, they're about to get a rather nasty surprise. The Fly. In the 6th episode of the first season, Rick Potion number 9, Rick gives Morty a love potion. While he's pretty critical of the idea, Rick just wants Morty to shut up, and Morty decides to use it on his love interest. Unfortunately, due to the potion being negatively affected by the flu, everyone starts to become obsessed with Morty as the potion's effect spreads. Rick figures that it might be possible to get them all turned off of Morty by using another potion with the DNA of a praying mantis, which has very little interest in its mate. However, this has the opposite effect, turning them all into praying mantis monsters. The episode references David Cronenberg by name many times, and it's easy to see why. It's a very blatant homage to David Cronenberg's 1986 remake of The Fly. While the original Fly is considered a classic, the 80s version is one of the few remakes to become just as iconic as the original, taking the concept in a completely new direction. The emphasis on body horror made it horrifying to audiences of the time, and Rick and Morty's writers clearly loved it. This episode turns an entire version of Earth into a Cronenberg nightmare.
Go ahead. Take him.
Needful Things. In the episode Something Ricked This Way Comes, which is in itself a reference to the Ray Bradbury novel Something Wicked This Way Comes, Morty's sister Summer begins work at a shop called Needful Things. This should ring a few bells for Stephen King fans, as the author did write a story with the exact same name. In this episode, the devil gives away items seemingly for free. The payment isn't clear until after the customer has brought the item home. Once the item has performed its evil magic, the devil is satisfied. The general plot of the episode is a comical take on the Stephen King story, with Rick opening up a side business to remove the evil magic from the devil's items. This causes them to go into business against each other, with Rick doing everything he can to put Needful Things out of business. Though the plot may seem nonsensical, this also serves as a pretty important episode for Summer, as it's one of the first times she gets any real characterization on the show beyond being an annoying teenager. We also get to see an overly muscle-bound Rick and Summer knee the devil in the face, which isn't something you'll see very often in this life.
Do we know what this giant head wants?
Show me what you got!
Jim, you heard them said, show me what you got.
H.P. Lovecraft. The popular episode Get Schwifty is a very interesting amalgamation of pop culture. Not only is it an obvious spoof on TV shows like American Idol, but it's also heavily entrenched in the cosmic horror of H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft's work dealt with things beyond our perception, things that make us feel small. Rick and Morty uses those exact same concepts but presents them in a more comedic light.
3, 4.
The idea of a race of giant aliens appearing in the sky one day and forcing planets to compete in a musical contest where the winners don't have to be destroyed is a funny concept. It's also downright horrifying once you begin to think about it. Not only that, but in true Lovecraft fashion, we see the effect of it on people on the ground, with the people of Earth becoming a crazed cult worshipping the aliens. Not unlike the numerous cults in the Cthulhu mythos. The aliens themselves are similar to Yog-Sothoth, who is described as being a conglomeration of glowing spheres. Glowing heads in the sky is not much of a stretch. The Cromulons are fairly distinct from anything actually in the Cthulhu mythos, but the idea of them is so reminiscent of them that we're sure it's enough to make Sam Neill go crazy. Alien. In the episode Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, Rick becomes a teenager. The adventures of Tiny Rick aren't exactly the main focus of this entry though, as before Rick becomes tiny, he sent his daughter and her husband off to an alien couple's therapy session. Beth and Jerry wear devices that allow the other to see a visual representation of how they visualize one another. While Beth sees Jerry as a weak, pathetic worm, Jerry sees Beth as a huge, terrifying alien creature. One that looks very much like the xenomorph from Alien. We all know that the xenomorph is the ultimate predator built to hunt and made from the DNA of both its artificially created race and whichever life form it hosts it. We know that it's a calculated and terrifying creature, and we totally understand why Jerry sees Beth in that light. After all, she is pretty intense. To make matters worse, Jerry and Beth's marriage troubles are so great that it causes the two of them to break out and start attacking the couples at therapy. There's very little to stop her, as nothing like this has ever happened before. From there, it's up to the couple to put their differences aside to try to stop Beth's stomping ego. Purge. If there's one recent film series that's polarizing, it's The Purge. Some people love it, others think it's a stupid concept that's poorly executed. Rick and Morty's opinion seems to be somewhere in the middle, with Morty saying how stupid the idea is and how it doesn't really change a thing. Rick, on the other hand, thinks the concept is great and a whole lot of fun. When they end up on an alien planet during its annual purging festival, Rick and Morty have to fight for their lives without their portal gun and without their spaceship. The duo fight their way through the night and even overthrow the evil government that organizes the Purge just to liberate the planet. Unfortunately, when the people of the planet try to work out their differences, they soon discover capitalism and then come to the conclusion that they need a purge once a year to get out all of their anger and hatred towards one another. And thus, we come full circle. The episode plays about with the themes and ideas of the Purge, including the idea of it really being about class warfare. The original movies bring it up quite a lot, unsubtly, and Look Who's Purging Now runs with it.
I promise you, nobody gets out of here alive.
Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. Before the release of Fury Road, most fans agreed that while Mad Max didn't really have a bad entry, the second was clearly the best film. It's probably the most iconic with characters like Lord Humongous, and it was the movie to really bring the wasteland to Mad Max. It's also the main inspiration for the Season 3 episode Rick Mansing the Stone. The divorce of Morty and Summer's parents caused them to go out to a parallel Earth where the world has become a giant wasteland. The episode is dripping with Mad Max references. Not only is Summer's love interest modeled heavily off of Lord Humongous, but everything from the design of the cars to the design of the costumes is about as close to Mad Max as you can get. It doesn't just stop with the Road Warrior though. The episode also has its own version of the famous and beloved Thunderdome from the third Mad Max film. Once again, it uses its outlandish setting to say something more about the characters and develop them more as people. The episode serves to give the two kids catharsis over their parents' divorce. After Summer ends up in a relationship with the leader of the Deathstalkers and ends up becoming a lot like her mother. This causes her to reconcile with her dad. The Avengers and Saw. Episode 4 of Season 3, Vindicators 3, Return of the World Ender, is a strange mix of the Avengers and Saw. The episode plays about with the idea of superheroes and makes them out to be awful people while dealing with Rick's inferiority complex thanks to them. Rick gets blackout drunk, kills the Vindicators' worst enemy, and then puts them in a Saw-like trap where they have to answer questions successfully or face death. Unfortunately, the Vindicators are also corrupt and selfish themselves that they end up causing the deaths of each other. It not only references Saw with its setup and stakes, but also pokes fun at superheroes and how bizarrely perfect they have become in recent movies. It also frames Rick as a superhero in his own right, seeing as he is one of the Vindicators and has apparently fought by their side before. He's so smart, however, that he ultimately makes them irrelevant. Despite being so much better at stopping evil than they are, he just can't get the respect and love of his grandson, something that makes him very sad indeed. Once again, Rick and Morty creates a bizarre setup from two wildly different franchises and uses it to further develop and establish its characters. Well, that's all we have time for today. Rick and Morty seems to love movies and references almost as much as we do. Were there any that we missed that we didn't include? If so, comment below and let us know. Before we go, one last thing. If you played our emoji quiz today and answered the following, then you were right. Remember to subscribe to get more videos from our playlist, and as always, thanks for watching.